Well, hello, lovely humans. Welcome back to my channel. This week's video is actually an excerpt from my podcast, Engage with Jamie Wolfer. That's me, because I like puns. And you get engaged because you're engaged. Get it? But this is one of the most interesting and most important conversations I've had over on Engage to date. It's with Jen from Urban Marigold talking about all things sustainable florals, which sounds like an oxymoron, but she really truly opened my eyes to all of the opportunities that we can be taking as consumers with florals for our wedding day and the changes that we could be making and what it can do for our beautiful earth that we live on. Do I sound like a walking cheesy billboard right now? Yes. But listen, you can have beautiful real flowers and still have a sustainable wedding. This is like the best news that's happened to me in a very long time. I will let you know that this was not initially intended to be a video style podcast, so we are both using very low quality webcams. But I don't think that detracts away from the message of what Jen is trying to share in today's video. But if you are interested in hearing this conversation and more conversations like it over on Engage, you can find it linked right here. I would love to have you over there. So without further ado, let's just jump right on into it. Jen, thank you so much for being here with me today. I cannot wait to pick your brain about all things sustainable florals, two of my favorite words together in one moment, and I absolutely love it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, okay, obviously people listening probably have no idea who you are. Give us a little like snippet of who are you? Wait, what do you do?
Yeah, my name's Jen. I'm a floral designer based in Orange County in Laguna Hills, California. I'm super passionate about sustainable design, and my company is called Urban Marigold, just Urban, URBAN, and Marigold, like the awesome flower we all love. So fluffy and wonderful.
This is so fluffy.
So fluffy. Yes.
Okay, so sustainability
Yes.
is a beautiful word. It's a scary word. It's a word that like couples hear and they're like, oh, I should probably do that. But it feels really unachievable for so many people. Why did you get started with sustainable florals? Because it almost feels like an oxymoron, right? Like jumbo shrimp, sustainable florals.
Right.
Why'd you get started with that? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, well, I think like most florists, like when you start out, you just don't know. You know that these are the tools you have, essentially like floral
Hmm.
foam and all that not good stuff. And I just didn't know better really.
Yeah.
And as I went throughout my business and kind of learning what floral foam was actually made of, it's like, one of the ingredients is like formaldehyde. It's like, ooh, no, no, thank you. Like that's not happy for people, the people making it, for the
No.
flowers, like nobody at all. But I started seeking out other florists who were practicing sustainable design. Like one who's been a huge influence on me is Alyssa Lytle from Color Theory. She has a whole educational program called Flowering Minds. And this is where I really learned that it was
Mm.
possible. And it was just being introduced to product like agri-wool, which is like a mineral wool. It's compostable, and like the ocean pouch was essentially like this like compostable bag full of like soil and clay and things like that. And
What?
I didn't even know these things existed. Yeah. And I was like,
I didn't
well,
even know these things exist. I thought we were just going to talk about frogs the whole time.
right, I
Everyone's like,
know.
what's a frog?
I know. Yeah, for those who don't know, floral frogs look like they're like circular little like medieval torture devices. They kind of look like that, but yet they are so happy with flowers. They
Yeah.
make flowers very happy, and it's like a circular. They come in plenty of different sizes. They're
Yeah.
heavy and weighted, and you can put them at the center of your vessel or vase,
Yeah.
and that you just plug the stems in happily. And
It's
yeah,
like a tiny bed of nails. So it's literally like
exactly.
a disc with a bunch of prongs facing up, sharp prongs, right?
Yeah.
And it's called, I don't know who gave this the name frog
I know.
or what happened,
No, it's like
but like,
why was it called this? Yeah.
so that's what a frog is. If you see something round, they're very popular at antique shops too, because this used to be the way that all florals were done was
Totally.
with a frog, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's more options. There's like an ocean bag and
Yeah.
a what, a what?
Agri-wool. Yeah.
Agri-wool. Gesundheit.
Agri-wool, yes. Mineral wool. Yeah. And they're essentially like a foam replacement. They come in like block form. And yeah, kind of going back to like, what you said too, it's just like the antique shops with floral frogs and things like that. It's like there was floral design way before foam was ever created. And I think
Right.
that's right what we kind of come back to. And like even, there was like this wonderful book called The Guide to Floral Mechanics, and they have like amazing sustainable examples of how to do like those really gorgeous like aisle flowers, and it's just like glass trays with rocks like stones in them, and it's like,
Stop it.
yeah, and just like chicken wire, and it's just like, okay, this sounds like a lot, but like once you get familiar and in the habit of doing it, it
Yeah.
becomes like second nature. Like, of course, like with agriwool, like, and that's why, like, I take time to like tinker with these things. And that's where
Mm.
like like going back to like the flowering minds course was super helpful, because there was like and also like without even, you could actually just like follow flowering minds too, if you're interested in seeing some of these techniques.
Yeah.
Like one of them was, with the agriwool and like chicken wire, like using big branches and constructing your own arch. So you could just adhere that to like a rental item or a rental arch or something like that. And like I literally, like, we had like a rainstorm for once in Orange County, and like some huge branches from eucalyptus trees fell down in the park, and
Score.
I like in there with my tears, like double checking. I'm like, no one's using these, right? And just like built my own like art structure essentially. And I can reuse the structure. Like it's filled with like moss and the agriwool and things like, and chicken wrapped in chicken wire, and like I dry them out like in my
Mm.
backyard in the sun, and like reuse them until like they're literally like falling apart. So I've like used it probably
Fine. I'll
4
switch to something
times.
new. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, I definitely, I'm not the first one to do this by any means, but it's, I think, an important step to implement in your design, because it is possible. And I know like some
Yeah.
designers have complaints about, like the agriwool, but like it does like, drain a little bit, but it's like, okay, bring a tarp to the venue. It's like, and it just, you figure it out and you get used to
Right.
it, and it is possible,
Yeah.
basically.
And it
Yeah.
sounds like it's not so bad that it's so much of a deterrent that you're not doing it anymore, right? It's like you make some adjustments, things look different. And it sounds like a lot of the stuff, obviously, if you're being sustainable, you need to go back and pick it up, right? So your day as a florist looks different. And some people may be kind of bothered by that inconvenience. But for you, I mean, you're not going to want to, if this is reusable, you're going back for it.
Right,
Right.
exactly. Yes, yeah. And if I know the couple would like to keep like the arch piece, I'm like, okay, I'll just do like a chicken wire wrap rather than using, like I use these again, shout out to Flowering Minds, learned about this these bird feeder cages where she would stuff the ocean pouches in, and it expands when you add water. So that's like another way to have like, instead of a cage foam situation,
Yeah.
there are these alternatives. So if like I know the couple wants to keep something, I'll just do like a chicken wire wrap around with moss around the agriwool, and then be like, here you go, and don't throw it in the trash, like unwrap it and throw this agriwool in the green bin, please. Like just a
Yeah.
reminder, like that kind of thing. So but yeah, it's taken time to implement and a
Mm.
lot of practice, and
Hmm.
just adapting to how these sustainable mechanics work,
Yeah.
and how to kind of pick and choose which like item is best served for the design and that kind of thing. So, and how can I, reuse these till the end of time?
Yeah. Now, how much of this is an expense that has to be passed on to the couple? Like, because all this sounds great, but in my mind, I immediately go to, okay, so foam's pretty dang cheap, right? Like, which is why everyone uses it. So, but then obviously, if you're using the agriwool 4 times, the cost is spread out over 4 events. Does this make it more expensive for the couple to pick a sustainable florist?
No, it does not. And like
Hmm.
every business is different. I'm speaking for me personally.
Hmm.
And I just, in being able to reuse the things like agriwool and just chicken wire and moss and things like that, I've been able to, charge, what I would normally charge with,
Mm.
without foam. So, or what, what most floors would charge like normally with the foam, implementing
Yeah.
that cost, like it's hasn't really changed. So it's like, because I've been able to like reuse them and
Y- Yeah.
all that good stuff. And same thing with chicken wire. It's like if I'm doing the centerpieces, and I'm just doing like a frog, going back to the frogs and like the
Yeah.
chicken wire, like, I pull out the chicken wire and like I make sure I use like untreated, like I don't get like the painted green chicken wire, because
Sure.
that paint chips off into the water, and like that's not happy for the flowers or anything like that. So I just make sure to reuse those as much as I can until they're just,
Mm.
just recycle them. So
It's
yeah.
time to go. It's time for you to be
Yes,
put away
exactly.
now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like by no means perfect, like, but it's a start. And I think
Yeah.
there, with events, there is so much waste, and there, I think, with sourcing like local products and
Mm.
local foliage and flowers from like farms down here in Orange County that we're lucky enough
Yeah.
to have, are a great way to do that too, because if they're organic and not being sprayed to heck with pesticides, they can be
Right.
compostable. And so I think that's also, I wish it was something.
Wait, so if they're sprayed with pesticides, you can't compost them.
Yeah, usually no. Yeah.
Wait, okay, so we're pretty crunchy. Like we
Yeah.
eat as much organic as possible. We raise animals organic. Like we're
Yeah.
very much on that vein. But I didn't realize that if it has been sprayed with pesticides, the whole composting process is probably a no-go.
Yeah, especially if you're like using it to replant like in your soil and stuff.
Right.
It's like all that stuff is hanging out in that soil now. So it's just yeah, it's yeah, it's not
It's
fun
not
stuff.
it's not
I
it's not fun for anybody. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to eat it personally if it was
Yeah,
like grown in the
exactly.
compost.
Yeah.
That's so
So and
interesting.
yeah, and the great thing about too with like the local farms is like nothing is wrapped in plastic and you can ask for no rubber bands and things like
Yeah.
that. So it's like I think most florists in general try their best to source locally too, but and I think that's part of like, our job is to showcase these
Mm.
local ingredients rather than, the rose filled, pampas grass filled,
Right.
painted palm leaf filled Pinterest images. It's like, well, how can you
Right.
make these sexy? Like, have you thought
Right.
these sexy
Mm.
unique flowers,
But have you
So
seen this one from my neighbor? Yeah,
yeah,
right. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
how do you do that? Like, because we are in an industry that's saturated with photos. How do you guarantee a look for a couple, right? If they're like, here's our color palette, and you're like, cool, I'm gonna see if Sue's growing anything like that, right? And they're like, I'm sorry, what? Like, there's not a guarantee we're gonna get this. What does that look like with a couple? Like, do you have so many backyard florists or so many groups of floristry persons? I don't even know what they're called. A conglomerate of floral artists or growers that you can guarantee a color. What does that look like?
yeah, I always try to focus on color more than variety
Okay.
because we all are imported, local or not. We're all at the whim of Mother Nature essentially,
Hmm.
and I always just like to focus on the general color palette and overall feel of what they're going for.
Okay.
So if something like, like roses, they're obviously like a hard thing to replace, but like what other cool focal flower can we do? Like a textural
Right.
dahlia or a mum. Like mums have really blown up this year and it's been super exciting because they've been kind of often overlooked. Like it's a grocery store filler and like they're coming in
Right.
really beautiful colors and things like that. So and yeah, we have that talk in our initial consultation. Like when I'm just like, look, I can't guarantee anything. These are living, breathing things that we are trying to
Yeah.
create and make an extension of you and feel like you at your wedding. And yeah, it's that's just always a really important thing to address.
Yeah.
It's just like it's nothing is guaranteed. Let's focus on the colors and how they're coming
Yes.
together. And that's what's gonna be beautiful no matter what. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Colors and textures. We can
yeah,
translate that, right? But
yeah.
I cannot guarantee you that we're going to get a sand colored David Austin rose. Like that's
Right.
not, I can't guarantee that. So if a couple wants to replicate this, I mean, we already have the assurances that if they hunt around correctly, they could probably find a sustainable florist that's going to
Mhm.
be similar in cost. So let's remove that fear from the get-go, right? That the supplies, like the reusable supplies, are in the grand scheme of things going to equal out in cost. Do you find it being now I'm returning to that real quick before we go into like helping couples. Do you find it being more expensive to source the florals locally? Like, do you see a huge increase in cost getting something from Costa Mesa versus Costa Rica?
It totally depends. Like the pricing is always forever fluctuating. Like I
Okay.
know people talked about like inflation a lot, but it's like I'm
Right.
always constantly looking at like the bigger wholesalers like Mayesh and companies like that. Okay, like how is this fluctuating? And it's constantly changing. Like even roses will be like 125 a stem one week and then like 185. So just I'm just
Yeah.
constantly trying to stay on top of it. Whereas like the farmers usually have a pretty consistent price and it's usually I find it can be more affordable depending on what it is. Like if
Okay.
it'll change depending on the actual like variety or how much they have. But
Hmm.
like if they have a surplus of stuff, they're trying to, like maybe something that's like less popular, like a rudbeckia, which is like a really fun, like kind of fall, almost like it has like a dark center and they have these lush, like goldeny, like
Oh, oh,
ombre petals. And they come in like a deeper chocolate brown color. They're really
oh.
cool. Like those, like they might have like a surplus of those. And since that's not like, something that's, as highly sought after, because it's kind of a
Right.
more unique thing, they might, discount that. So just constantly being in
I
communication
love
with
that.
them, so it's like they're not like really always a set price, but they try to
Right.
have like a range, I think, most of the time. But I usually find it's like more affordable because I'm like, oh, okay, like that, like in springtime, I'm like, oh, that's like that bunch of sweet peas is not the same amount as like what a bigger company is trying to sell me sweet peas for, and it's local. It's not from, you know, Holland or something like that. So
Right.
I was
Yeah,
like,
I think
okay, I'm like, and they tend to be, you know, happier because they haven't been out of water, flown on a plane, and they tend to be a little more unique, a little tenderly and stuff, because they haven't been bred for like Pinterest perfection, you know, from so
right.
also. Not that I'm hating against Holland sweet peas. Let me tell you, I'll take them all day, every day. But like
All
the fact
day.
that all day, yeah. But the
God
fact,
bless that Holland soil. I don't know
I
what y'all
know
are doing over there,
that's
but like
the
y'all are
magic.
doing some magical things.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I think there's so many fears around going sustainable. It's just going to cost me more. It's going to be so much more effort. It's going to be so much more work. And it's like, well, is it though? Did you look? Did you
Yeah,
ask? Right?
right. Yeah.
So what does this look like if a couple wants to replicate? So now, like, now that we've addressed their fears and taken away some of these excuses, just kidding, sort of. What does it look like to copy this? Like, how can a couple pull this off? What should they be looking for? What questions should they be asking?
Yeah, I think the initial question is always like, do you design with foam? I think because that's like the main thing that
Yeah.
we can adjust to and adapt to. And I think that's just a really good place to start. Is
Okay.
just like, okay, do you offer foam free designs? Is that a possibility? And like I know some florists that do. If like couples are interested in an act that and ask about it, they will, you know, adapt to that. And I think, you know, depending on their design practices, like I can speak for myself, but it's like, yeah, to me it is worth dragging my agar-wool filled moss arch out into the sun to dry to reuse it again.
Right.
You know,
To
for
not
some people,
expose all of your guests to
yeah,
formaldehyde.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So I think it's definitely like dependent upon the business. Like I definitely
Mm.
do, you know, more intimate weddings and not huge. Like I'm not like a huge luxury churning out tons of like 300 guest events all the time. That's just not my vibe. But so for me, this works, and it's
Yeah.
also just very. I am just very motivated by it now, knowing the
Mm.
things that I know about foam, and they just like sit in the landfill forever. And you know, it's like
Yeah.
thinking about that is what lights the fire under my butt to continue to try.
Okay. Sorry, I got excited again. Okay, but what about the more eco-friendly foams? Like a foam that says eco-friendly or compostable. Like what
Yeah,
is that just really good
it's
marketing?
yeah,
Or
that's unfortunate because essentially they crumble more like easily. They break down easily, but they're still a single use plastic, so they're not technically
oh.
doing. Yeah, so I would
Oh.
say yeah,
You won't see it as easily,
it's
but
a
it's still there.
bummer. Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
unfortunate. Okay,
yeah,
so first of all, asking a florist, do you offer foam free design,
yeah,
right? And
yes.
then what other questions should they be asking?
I think like, you know, do you source locally? Do you work with any
Mm,
local seasonal stuff? And also, you know, that helps for the couple to come from a place of being open to that, like open to
mm,
like some funkier, unique flowers
yeah.
that are more seasonal and local and available locally for their weddings. And again, considering that, because like I think a lot of the times that florists are one of like the last vendors booked. So by the time they've had the date, the venue, and like the planner, like they're not necessarily thinking about seasonal flowers. Like
Right.
they're, oh, this date is important to us because our grandparents got married on this
Mm,
date. You know, they're not necessarily thinking about the seasonality of like the flowers and stuff like
yeah.
that. So I think always coming with an open mind, like, are there some local flowers you could suggest for this color palette, or
Mm.
are there some seasonal flowers you could suggest for this like our vibe? Like I think that's always helpful too. And just considering that too, and just being open to that
Yeah, I
as well.
think it's hard because something Rebecca's on staff with us. She's a florist by trade, but like we've stolen her over to the dark side of wedding planning. And she still does floral. She works with you all the time.
Yeah.
And she's like, here's the deal. You can get a flower any time of year. Somewhere, some greenhouse is growing it, right? It's just gonna affect the size. And technically, it's not in season. They're just like not forcing, that's over dramatizing the sound of this. They're just like replicating what the world would feel like in order to be prime growing conditions for this floral, right? So like peonies will just be a lot smaller in the off season. But if we're
Mhm.
really focusing, because that means you're getting it flown in from somewhere. That means you're getting it from somewhere that has a different environment that's not down the road, that's not as sustainable, correct? So being open to whatever is seasonal means being open to what's local to you,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly. And I think that's a good thing to consider. And also on the subject of peonies, like there's been some amazing, I can't remember exactly who, but some genius figured out peonies flourish in Alaska of all places.
good
And
Lord,
yeah,
do they really?
there's this amazing peony farm, and Eagles on Alaska, and then there's another one too, but I'll have to
I
send it.
love that you just have like all of these accounts where you're like, this account does this account does that. And it's not just like, oh, I follow this florist who does. You're fun to chat with. This is exciting. Okay, keep going.
I try.
You know the
like,
farms.
I know. So it's crazy. So it's like, okay, like they're coming from Alaska, then that kind of helps extend their season. But okay, at least if you're based in the US, you're getting them from Alaska as opposed to, Holland or Ecuador, and it's like, it's not to say that that product isn't beautiful and wonderful, but it's just like, okay, just thinking about, the distance and the time it takes for those flowers to get to you and where they're coming from. It's like just taking that into consideration and like knowing that and asking that of your florist, like, are peonies possible? Does this, I don't expect, clients to know this. Like, that's what, we're here for. But things like that, where it's like, okay, well, if you're getting married on this date, I think I can, reach out to the Alaskan peony farms and see if this is possible. So I can help make that more, less travel, but less distance situation happen, if they have availability. So things like that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So it's like, even so that's kind of more pertains like to the seasonality of it, where it's just like, some genius figured that out in Alaska. But so if we can't get them locally, if they're still in season at these glorious Alaskan farms, can we get those?
Yeah. So it sounds like, one, don't be scared like it's going to cost more. To be open to different textures and different floral varieties. You're still probably going to end up getting the same overall end results, right? Like you're still going to get the same color palette or as close as possible, because we are dealing with live things here and life happens. But it's so much more achievable than I think a lot of people think. Like it really is a couple of simple twists, and then all of a sudden you have a sustainable display, or a far more sustainable display.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's those resources just even on Instagram too, if like couples or vendors want to check, like Prairie Girl Flowers, like she is like on top of like what's going on with, like floral foam and other sustainable design options. And there's this great company called New Age Floral that like imports the agar wool. I think it's like based in Sweden. Don't quote. I'm like, where is it based? But
yeah, if you're wrong,
but
we can't air this podcast.
It's not Sweden. It's how dare you? But like New Age Floral, like just following those accounts and being on their like email lists are really helpful, because they're always coming up with like they recently came out with like some non-plastic like compostable water tube options. So it's just like
fantastic.
Because that's one thing too. Like I'm still utilizing those, but of course I reuse them and wash them and do all those things. But but it's like they're still plastic, so it's like what's like the next step I can take. But I think the initial first step for clients to ask too is just about the foam, because I think that's just initially one of like the most common things.
It's like the gateway drug into floral sustainability.
Like, oh no. And the same thing too with like, and I see a lot of inspiration that's painted or bleached, and explaining that, like asking them if florists or they implement, any painted designs or bleach product or dyed flowers, like, because those things, again, going back to those don't compost because they're full of dye and things like that. So, and there's ways to like achieve that, like with naturally dried products that will achieve that same look. Like, okay, we can't get this bleached white ruscus, but like there's this amazing
there's a bleach white ruscus. No.
Yes, I know. What? I know. And it's super sharp and pointy. It's just like, no, why this? It's like, let's pull from Mother Nature's already gorgeous inventory. Like we don't need to, like, it's like at the same time, it's like it's like with art, like you always want to see boundaries pushed and different and colors manipulated and things like that. But like with flowers, it's just like it comes with a cost, and with dyed flowers and painted flowers, it's just like it's just not good. So,
no, it's not something that like
those aren't breaking down, those aren't going anywhere.
So. Also, have you seen Lunaria? Like that is gorgeous. That's a beautiful one. I want to grow it in my garden next year. I got the seeds for it, and I'm very excited.
Cool. It's so cool.
It's so cool.
It's like literally like nature's chandelier. It's just like
it's one of my favorite. So because I really like ruscus. Of course, I prefer Italian over Israeli ruscus because I like how droopy it gets. And everyone's like, "What is Jamie talking about right now?" Yeah. But like, if we're gonna do something white, there's something about I have been dying to do some sort of Lunaria display type thing. Oh, it's just so, see, here's the deal. I like to pretend that I'm a florist and I know things, and I don't. And that's the problem talking with you especially when you start saying stuff like compost and sustainability, Homestead Jamie comes out and then she pretends like she could do florals too. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us, for sharing your expertise, for making sustainability in the floral industry feel less scary. Like that, everything you just said feels very achievable. Feels like any couple can go to a florist and ask these questions or ask if they'd be willing to try any of these things. And it's a lot more possible than I think a lot of people think it is.
Yes, definitely.
If you want to hear more conversations like this and want to dive into Engage, it is intended to be a short form podcast where if you've got like 15, maybe 20 minutes to spend with your wedding planner, let's get all the bite-sized information into you, very much like we do here on this channel. I cannot wait to see you all over there. Be sure to subscribe because we are growing this little itty bitty baby podcast into something that's big and beautiful, and I would love to have you over there. And if you enjoyed it, please feel free to leave it a 5-star review to let the podcast people know that Jamie knows what she's talking about. Because even though it's on the newbie side, we want to make sure that we give it a thumbs up 5-star approval rating. All right. So that's what we have for this week's video, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. How about you? What was one of the biggest takeaways you took from today's video? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I love hearing from you guys. And until next week, bye guys.